Hey guys, this is Germinal Van. If you haven't purchased a copy of my latest book, Thomas Sowell, A Misunderstood Economist, the time is now. You can always purchase the book on Amazon.com or on the GGV Publishing website. This book, as I always presented, synthesized the entire intellectual apparatus of Dr. Sowell. So I am definitely sure that you're going to enjoy this reading if you love Dr. Sowell and if you always support his work. So go ahead, purchase your copy, and enjoy your reading. Hi everyone, this is Germinal Van, founder of GGV Publishing and your host for the GGV Publishing Podcast. I got another legend on the podcast today. Spike Cohen is in the house. Spike, welcome to the GGV Publishing Podcast.
I'm happy to be on, Germinal. Thanks for having me on, man.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad that you're here. I always wanted to have you on the platform and I finally reached out and you accepted. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Spike, so why don't you tell us about you, the man, before we know who Spike is in the libertarian movement, how Spike became Spike.
Oh God. Well, the literal answer of how Spike became Spike. So my given name, my legal name is Jeremy. And this is a very libertarian story. When I was 3 years old, or actually, I guess before I turned 3, I have an older brother. He is from my father's first marriage, so he's like I think 15 or 16 years older than me. And so he's almost more like an uncle growing up. And so when I was when I was very, very young, he was, I think, teasing me, but I was taking it very literally, again, libertarian. And he told me that Jeremy was a girl's name, like Julie or Jenny.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know why mom and dad, why they gave you this, girl's name. I don't know what to tell you. And so I did not like the name Jeremy. I was like, this is a girl's name. I don't want it. I'm not a girl. And so I ended up changing my name to Spike. And I mean, I guess when you're, 3 years old, you say all sorts of stuff to your parents. And I said, my name is Jeremy, or my name is Spike. And they were like, okay. And I think they thought it would go away and they just kept calling me Jeremy. And I kept insisting, like, no, my name is Spike. And even like, with other people, I would tell them I was Spike and I was just insisting I was Spike. Again, 3 years old. And so they took me to a either like a doctor or a behavioralist or something like that to make sure I was okay, like to make sure there wasn't like something wrong with me, that I had some kind of like disorder or whatever. And they talked to me and they were like, yeah, he just doesn't, like the name and he wants to go by Spike. I would go ahead and do it. It's probably just a phase. I'm now, I will be 42 years old in 2 weeks. So if it is a phase, it's a very long one. So that's how I became Spike, as actually being called Spike. I think in terms of like how I came to have the mindset that I have, there's many different factors and we could spend way too much time on that. But I think the biggest ones are that one of the first things that my dad told me about when I was like very young, like maybe 7, 8 years old, was he talked to me in pretty great detail about things that had happened in the past, like in the Holocaust and in the pogroms. I'm Jewish, and he would talk about those things and in more detail than a lot of people might think might be appropriate to tell a kid. And something he told me was that the reason that was able to happen was because we weren't able to defend ourselves, that guns had been taken away from us, and that we and everyone else in that society had been told it was for our safety, that guns are unsafe and that guns can hurt people, and that it was really that they never intended to keep us safe. It was they wanted to be the only ones to have guns. And what's interesting is, when you explain it that, starkly to a 7, 8 year old, however old I was, it made perfect sense. Yeah, okay. They said, oh, it's for your safety, but it actually wasn't. And he said, anytime that they're trying to, and it was part of a greater thing of basically, again, libertarian telling me, don't trust the government. They don't have your best interests. They have their interests. But a big part of it was him saying that when they say it's for your safety, they're trying to scare you, but also it's usually the opposite. It's not for your safety. It's for their safety, because they only want the bullets to be going in one direction. And so that has informed me basically my entire, as far back as I can remember, anytime, especially when it comes to gun control, but really on anything, as soon as I hear people going, we need government to do this to protect us, whatever it is, the hairs on the back of my neck go up. And I think, like, no, that's not true. It's the opposite. They want power that they can use against you. It has actually nothing to do with protecting you. And so I think that has really informed me, because, we so often, a lot of people on, I guess, broadly speaking, the right, we get that when it comes to guns, and most of us should get it on like economic things. But that spidey sense goes off anytime they're talking about protecting us or keeping us safe from something. I immediately go to that. I'm like, no, it's definitely to harm us. And that's really informed my most of my life going forward when it comes to me and the government.
So would you say that then you became pretty much a libertarian from since you were a kid?
In retrospect, I've always had that bent.
Yeah.
Now, when I was 19, I don't know. It's interesting because at the time I didn't necessarily know the word libertarian. I might have heard it, but I didn't identify as that. I just considered myself kind of broadly anti-government. But then, like, I'd listen to Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that. I liked all that stuff. I knew that they were communists, and I never thought like I'm a communist, but I just thought like I'm just broadly against the establishment and against the government. But I think if you would ask me, like, in my, in like my, 17, 18 years old, what I was, I would just say, like, I want to be left alone. We hear this a lot with people, right? You'll say, like, what do you consider yourself? And they go, I don't know. I don't really, I'm not big about politics. I just want to be left alone. Yeah. Maybe I might have considered myself a liberal, but at the time I considered liberal being leave me alone, let people do whatever it is they want. And certainly don't infringe, this is like late 90s stuff, let people say whatever they want. Don't try to be politically correct about anything. So I think that might have been what I consider myself. I also was more primarily concerned with my businesses. I started my first business when I was 16, and that moved on to an entire lifetime of entrepreneurialism. And so I was more focused on that than the political aspect. I wanted the government out of my life. I definitely didn't like taxes and regulations. But then when 9/11 happened, when I was 19, I didn't have any perspective on why it happened. It just seemed to come out of nowhere. And it was horrifying. It was frightening. I immediately was listening to what the media was saying, that, this could be happening. This might be our new normal. 9/11s might be happening every week or every day or every month or whatever. And I completely bought the government and media line, hook, line, and sinker. And keep in mind, I actually was watching MSNBC. Not because I was a liberal, but because I was like, oh, MS, Microsoft. To me, in my techie mind, I was like, well, maybe that's the best place to get information because it's the most, I don't know, technologically new or something, being related to Microsoft. And so I just sort of defaulted to watching that. It was there that I became a neocon. It was there that I was hearing every person they put in front of me, every government official, every so-called expert or talking head, they were all saying the same thing, that, these people hated us for our freedoms. And, maybe they'd be critical of Bush or something like that, or say that Gore would have handled it better. But it was they were all literally saying the same thing. They hated us for our freedoms. We had done nothing wrong. And we now needed to spread democracy, not just defend ourselves, but we needed to protect the public. And this is probably the one time that I had a blind spot for it, because when they talked about the Patriot Act, when they talked about warrantless wiretapping, I was just like, listen, whatever it takes to keep us safe from that. That was the one time that what my dad had taught me didn't come out, but it was because I, like so many others, they found the thing that they could scare me with. And so it was many years that I considered myself a neocon. And it was these really annoying, the people on the left that were anti-war, they struck me immediately as hypocrites. Like, oh, you'd have no problem with this back when Clinton was president. You certainly will have no problem if John Kerry or Howard Dean or whatever beats Trump in the next election. Nothing that they said connected with me at all, because then it was a bunch of other stuff that I didn't agree with. And then there were these very annoying libertarians, and one in particular named Matt Kibbe, who at some point I had filled out some lead capture email. This was before social media, but I had found somewhere online, I'd found some petition or something that I signed. And anyway, so in some way, FreedomWorks got my email address. And so I started getting regular emails from Matt Kibbe of FreedomWorks. And he would send me all this stuff, and almost all of it I agree with. But whenever he talked about the war or about the Patriot Act or anything related to foreign policy from a small government, stay out of your life perspective, he'd go, of course you don't support the empires overseas and, spending trillions of dollars on the same failed foreign policy that got us the Vietnam War and what led to in the Middle East, what led to Saddam and Hussein invading Kuwait after the Iran-Iraq war and all of that. And of course you don't support the government, warrantlessly surveilling all of us and wiretapping you at any time, or taking American citizens and sending them to other countries where they can be tortured. And you certainly don't support taking people without any kind of trial or due process and putting them in Guantanamo Bay for the rest of their lives because there's not enough evidence to actually try them for anything. Of course you don't support that. And I remember I'd get so angry and I'd actually close my email program on my computer, and I would think, man, this guy's so wrong. Excuse me, he wants the terrorists to win and all of this. But I'd always go back and read it, and I'd read it to the end, and I go, that guy's wrong, that guy's wrong. But it was resonating with me. And it was because he was presenting it from a perspective of, well, you already agree with me on this, so certainly you must agree with me on this, logically speaking. Yeah. And it took a while and a lot of anger, but I eventually realized that neocon aspect of me wasn't being consistent between that and also just being disabused by reality. The war in Iraq failed. Afghanistan was becoming a mess. All the prediction these annoying libertarians had made turned out to be true. Every time I got angry at Ron Paul when I'd see him on TV and stuff, everything he was saying was right, was turning out to be true. That led me down the path of eventually becoming a libertarian.
Wow. This is actually interesting to learn that you were a neocon for such a long time. I never thought that you were even a neoconservative for so long.
As strongly now as I advocate for self-ownership and non-aggression and property rights and being out there as a libertarian and pushing for libertarian, I was every bit as strongly for interventionism at home and abroad, and so-called keeping America safe for democracy. I was as radical of a neocon as you could get. There was no amount of military interventionism that, if presented to me, I wouldn't say, yeah, let's do it. Like the idea of making just about every country in the Middle East a part of the axis of evil, perfectly fine with that. Like I was convinced of the impervious nature of the military, that like our military, you couldn't stop it for anything. It was so big and so expensive. That was probably the biggest reality check that there was, my belief in this like invincibility of the military. And then watching that, it was like, no, they couldn't even, the Taliban was holding their own, and Iraq. Yeah. I mean, certainly we toppled the structured military of Saddam Hussein, but that we weren't going to stop the insurgencies and things like that. And I remember the libertarians saying they're creating the next Al-Qaeda. And I remember looking it up and reading that, yeah, Al-Qaeda was created from the Mujahideen that Carter and then Reagan supported to fight against the Soviets. That's who we were now fighting in Afghanistan. And sure enough, they fricking made ISIS. And I even before that all happened, I was like, wow, that really is what happens. But yeah, no, I was as strongly as a libertarian as I am today. I was that strongly of a neocon, and that outspoken of a neocon. Thankfully, I didn't have anywhere near the platform I do now, because I'd have a lot more to apologize for. But I absolutely, I own it. I was a hardcore neocon. Yeah.
Now I want to know from your perspective the relationship between entrepreneurship and economics. I would assume that maybe entrepreneurship was one of the big reasons why you became like a strong proponent of libertarian economics, the free market, the fact that, you're your own boss and you don't want the government to interfere in the economy
Yeah.
because the private sector is the one like creating wealth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so can you tell us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur, like how you started and what were the challenges that you faced, growing your business or your businesses, and how it impacts your thinking on libertarian economics?
Yeah, so that's the thing. I was so young starting off when I was really forming these opinions, and they lined up so closely with what I had been taught as a kid that I never really made like an actual connection of going, this is where my libertarian economics lines up with my entrepreneurialism. It was really so much more of almost like a gut thing where it was like, I have these businesses, I'm creating jobs, I'm creating wealth, I'm not hurting anyone. Why is the biggest obstacle the government? Like, why, and I didn't even have to say, why is it the biggest obstacle? I could hear, my dad telling me, sometimes literally on the phone, because that's what they do. You start making anything and they take it from you. But if you stop making anything, then they just give to you because now you're dependent on them. Like it. So that lined up perfectly. But so my journey into entrepreneurialism actually started in my very early teens. And so my dad, I was again from a second marriage. And so my dad, he's now almost 90 years old. And he at the time, so he was older than the other parents, and he was a lot more old school about things. And so he said to me, when once I had my bar mitzvah, in his mind, I'm a man. Like, I might not legally be a man, I'm still living at home and all that, but the way he was already talking to me a lot more like an adult than most people do with kids. When I turned 13, he was like, listen, we put a roof on your head and we give you your basic needs. You want to have stuff, spending money or whatever, you got to get a job. That's completely illegal. Like, you can't, in South Carolina, you got to be 15 years old unless you have like a family farm or something like that. You got to be 15 years old to work. I'm 13 years old. So I'm out looking for some nearby restaurant or something that'll hire me to do bit work. And I've found a restaurant that would let me work there on the summers, and bussing tables for $5 an hour under the table. And some of the staff would help tip me out when they were busy. I would help them with stuff as well. And I loved it. Technically it's child labor, but I loved every second of it because it had me active. I was learning all these things, how to do both the front of the house stuff and the back of the house stuff. I was getting to meet people and talk with people, but I learned so many things. And the three main things I learned were, number one, the value of money and using your labor to get money. Like it felt so cool. Like at the end of the day, again, I was getting tipped out, or I was getting cash and tipped out. So I'd walk home with a wad of, tens and 20s and stuff. You're 13 years old. That's like the biggest thing ever. And so I learned how valuable it was. I could go there, spend a few hours doing this stuff and finding a way to enjoy it and making money from it. The second thing I learned was the value of networking. The waiters and waitresses, most of whom were in their like late teens to mid to late 20s. So they were young themselves, but at the time they were, in my mind, much older than me. But having a relationship and a friendship with them and a rapport with them, the ones who had more of a rapport with me, they'd tip me out more, not just because they'd ask for my help more, but because they liked me more. So they give me, instead of just giving me like $3 or $4, they give me like 10 or $15. And that adds up if you got enough wait staff there, especially during the summers. But then the biggest thing that I learned was that I didn't want to do this moving forward. I was bussing tables, working in the back, helping the kitchen staff, doing flex work when needed with the servers. And they would have other people who would also be bussing tables, but they weren't just doing it during the summer. They'd be doing it year round. They were sometimes 2 or 3 times my age. These people were in their 20s. Some of them were in their 30s. And I thought, yeah, I'm a kid. I'm 13, whatever. I don't mind doing this stuff. I don't mind mopping floors. I don't mind bussing tables, but like long term, I don't want to do this. And then later on, when I got a little bit older, I did some work for a landscaping company. I'd be like mowing lawns and doing all sorts of stuff like that. Really like hard work. Again, during the summer when it's the hottest and muggiest. I live in South Carolina. It was rough, man. And again, I'm a kid. I already don't want to be doing this. And when I was doing landscaping work, some of the people that were out there with me were my age now. They were in their late 30s and early 40s. And I'm like, I sure as hell don't want to be doing this growing up. So the biggest thing I learned from that is I don't want to work for someone else. I want to work for myself. I want to be hiring people to do things so that I can make the money. And so my parents had told me, like, once you're 18, you either need to be going to college or getting a business or doing something. Like you're not just gonna be sitting here, not doing anything. And or you'll have to, go out and live with your friends or, go find your own place or something. Again, my parents were old school. And and so they were like, you can stay here, but you got to be doing something.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go to college. I didn't really like school. And I thought, okay, so what is something that I can do that allows me to work from home, because I don't have the capital to have have a business, work from home or work from my car, going to other places, working remotely and from home. What is something that doesn't require me to have to go to school? I don't need like some kind of degree or something like that. What requires like minimal licensing, like, a business license, just a minimal whatever to do that? And is something that someone is going to take a 16-year-old seriously when he shows up and says he does this for a living? Website design. And so I thought, okay. And this was 1990, late 98, early 99 that I started doing this. And, I'm looking at this from the standpoint of, okay, I don't need to be making money immediately. I just need to be showing my family that I'm like working, that I'm actually doing this. So I started going around. And first of all, I learned how to do the actual basic, web design and stuff like that, which back then was a lot more basic than it is now. But I learned how to use the software, and I did some test work and made some stuff. And then I started going around and offering my services. And I'd go up to people and I'd say, hi, would you like a business or would you like a website for your small business? And of course, usually they'd say, what's a website? Like that's the era. Or they'd go, yeah, I've heard of those, but what do I need it for? I thought that was for like, big companies or whatever. And my answer would be, well, a website is something I'm going to make for you for free. And it's going to make it easier for people who are looking for what it is you do. Instead of you having to pay for advertising, they'll actually be looking for you and pre-qualifying themselves. And then you'll have more clients. And if it works, after a year, you can start paying me for the monthly upkeep of the site. And if it doesn't work, then I'll just take it down and it won't cost you anything. And so I built up this huge repertoire of all these different companies I made websites for, because they're like, sure, I'll let this kid make something for me for free. So that happened. But the other thing that happened was I was always busy, because when it's free, when can you fit me? When can you do that?
Right.
And I started just charging. And I went from charging nothing to charging next to nothing to charging a little bit more until eventually I was charging. I always tried to stay at the bottom end of what people were charging, because I truly had no real overhead. And I kept just there, but I reached a point pretty quickly where I could be charging and tell people, listen, I need you to, I've only got this number of slots for the next 90 days. And it takes this long, this many weeks for me to turn it around and make you a website. If you want to get on, then I can get you on. Now, if you want to have it done within the next 30-day period, I charge this much more. I created scarcity. I created a velvet rope effect by literally taking people and just putting them in line and then putting a velvet rope around them. And so I very quickly, the only, if you want to call it an obstacle, besides the fact that I just gave myself too much work starting off, like I was so busy, but I was a kid, so it didn't really matter. The biggest thing was the government wanted their cut immediately. And I very quickly, it's funny, I've never gotten a paycheck in my life. I was paid under the table as a kid, and I've been 1099 ever since. So I've literally never gotten a paycheck, a single paycheck in my entire life.
Wow.
And so immediately I realized, like, my biggest obstacle was the government, for no reason, for no good reason. Like, literally, they're punishing me for being successful. And so that turned into, where I'd always had that kind of, like, I got to make sure that you always have a healthy distrust of the government and their, concentration of power and all of that. It became a resentment of the government, because I'm out here. You should be making parades for people like me, and having ticker tape as we go down the street.
Yeah, creating
We are the
values.
reason people have jobs. We're the reason people have anything. And I wasn't like, changing the world or anything, but it was like, I'm the reason that all these small businesses are making all this extra money. What is your problem with me? Why are you taking anything from me? So that absolutely informed my economics moving forward.
Wow. And so once you start getting more accustomed to libertarian economics, which economists among all the libertarians that we know impact you the most, you would say?
I would say so. I did it backwards. So I did the, realizing I wasn't a neocon, and then and sort of re-examining, like, well, gosh, if I was wrong about that, what else am I wrong about? Like, am I even a conservative? And so that's when I kind of went down the whole path of, I like to say, I read everything from Marx and Marx to Mises and everything in between. And yeah, I would say the three books, just broadly speaking, that influenced me the most were Bastiat's The Law,
Great book.
Spooner's No Treason, which that was the real. When I read that and I walked away, I'm like, oh God, now I got to be an anarchist. Like, I just reading that, I was like, man, he really just used contract law to explain why this is all BS and why it doesn't even apply to us. And oddly enough, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Carnegie, which is not a libertarian book, but it is, I would say, if anyone's looking for a book to read, that's the one, man. Like, if you haven't read that, I actually started reading that long before I got into politics, and that absolutely informed my opinion when it came to just like how to build movements, how to inspire people to want to be a part of what it is you're doing, how to actively be listening to others with the intent of finding out what it is they need so you can figure out how to fulfill that in what you're already doing. So that was very informative. In terms of economists, it's funny, the one that, and this is, me, I'm a big Austrian school guy. The one that really first connected with me, again, I'm from the young internet era, was watching the old Milton Friedman videos, mostly like the Free to Choose videos and his Phil Donahue interviews. But I would say after, reading Man, Economy, and State, and reading Mises and reading Rothbard and reading all of those. I will say economics in one lesson, any of those. It certainly, I ended up down the more the human action and I guess the Austrian / public choice way of looking at it, as opposed to trying to come up with some economic formula, realizing it has much more to do with individual human action than anything we can try to falsify and create models for. But I will say Friedman was one that I would like. I listened to it and I'm like, man, I don't disagree with anything he's saying. And that was even back when I was a neocon. It was really hitting me.
Oh, absolutely. I think I personally think that Milton Friedman is perhaps the greatest economists of the 20th century. I know, like, this is arguable, obviously, but that's my personal take, because I learned a lot from the guy. I watched Free to Choose. I read his books, even his more technical books, like A Theory of the Consumption Function, or a monetary history of the United States. And it gave me like a great understanding of technical economics, but economics in general, like how things work. Because once I start to read economics, my mindset completely shifts. I used to be a big political guy. I studied political science. I even wanted to be a politician at some point in my life. And I thought that, like, getting political power was the way, to change things and to improve things. And then I started getting more into economics, and I was like, in fact, politics is just corruption. it's just pure corruption. It's just punitive. I was completely disillusioned, completely. And I wanted to ask you about the Libertarian Party specifically. So, especially the last convention. What is your
Yeah.
take on the last convention? That was the widest. I even talked to Thaddeus Russell about it, and I
Yeah.
wanted to have your personal take, or should I say your expert take on the last convention. Where do you see the Libertarian Party going from there?
Yeah, so my expert take on what happened at the convention and the party, broadly speaking, is that what you had literally just said was the perfect segue for this. Well, let me give a background on my take broadly of the Libertarian Convention. We had this incredible opportunity where RFK Jr. and Donald Trump were going to be speaking at our convention. We are a party that desperately tries to get attention. Like, it is just so, we are the tree constantly falling in the woods, and there's no one there except for us to know that it even happened. We are being right over and over and over again, and no one knows. And even if they have an inkling that we exist, they don't care. We had the chance for millions, tens of millions of people to see our candidate. And all we had to do, the convention started Monday morning. Bobby Kennedy spoke Friday afternoon. Donald Trump spoke Saturday night. We had more than enough time. All we had to do was change business so that we picked our nominee on like for open of business, credential our credential and seat our delegates, and immediately go to picking our presidential and vice presidential candidate. And then we'd have the opportunity when Bobby Kennedy got up there and started speaking in the hall he was speaking at, we'd put our candidate right there to stare him down the whole time. And we would sit there, and anytime Bobby Kennedy would say anything about debating Trump, he kept saying he was there to debate Trump. We could say, debate our guy instead. Why won't you debate him? And, have the cameras watching our guy, and have our guy go over there and do interviews with the media and say, yeah, it's great what Bobby said. It's too bad he also thinks this and that. And, we believe this. And I don't know, he said he wanted to debate. Here I am. Let's debate. And either Kennedy debates the guy and, we can beat him with our superior facts and knowledge, or he doesn't debate us. And now it becomes Bobby Kennedy ducks debate opportunity with such and such, whoever the candidate is, Mike Rectenwald, Chase Oliver, Lars Mapstead, Mike Termont, Joshua Smith, whatever, whoever we pick, Jacob Hornberger, whoever, it would be refused to debate them, or did debate them and got destroyed in the debate, or whatever. They'd have that opportunity. Now, the problem is on Friday, instead, we argued all day over whether we were even going to seat all the delegates. And so that literally took all day, because you have two factions that both see each other as an existential threat to the party. It's not just that they're wrong and that our way is better. It's that if they win, then the party shouldn't even exist, and we don't even want to be a part of it. And so they spent what's that? The two main factions are the Mises Caucus and the classical liberal caucus. But this is a tale as old as time within the party. It has always been, broadly speaking, the radical faction, which right now is the Mises Caucus, and the more moderate or pragmatic faction, which is right now the classical liberal caucus. And it's always, there are some more radical people on one side, and there are some more pragmatic or moderate people on the other side, but it's basically our duopoly. It is the duopoly that naturally comes from any democratic function. And so then on Saturday, okay, fine. So we didn't get that chance with Kennedy, but it's Donald Trump is our shot to really get on there. We know there's going to be so much media. There's going to be thousands of people coming just to see it. And this is our chance to have them up there, unify around our candidate, have them give a rebuttal, have them do a press conference. And instead, we spent all day arguing over who the chair of the party was going to be. No one outside of the Libertarian Party delegates cares who the chair of the party is. It matters, but it didn't matter as much, in my mind, as picking a candidate and giving them this incredible opportunity to be in front of the entire country, the entire world. There was international media there. I was interviewed by people with the BBC and with a French publication and a German publication. Like, everyone was there. Almost every country in the developed world was represented there. And here was their opportunity to do that. And instead they went, no, we got to make sure our side's still in charge. And both sides were doing this. One side says, we want to make sure our side's still in charge. The other side says, we got to make sure that side's not in charge anymore. And it was because to them, that was an existential question. It was not just who's the chair of the party. It's, is this party even worth doing anything with anymore? And so where everyone else's priority would have been, yeah, okay, Libertarian Party. So did they finally pick their candidate yet? What are we doing here? No. First, we're going to argue on C-SPAN in front of anyone that's watching it. We're going to argue with each other over who our chair is going to be. And so we didn't pick a nominee until I think 1 o'clock in the morning on Monday, after spending 18 hours in the process of picking the candidate. And my takeaway from all of this is that this is the nature of democracy. Yeah. If you and I agree with each other 99.99% of the time, okay, but we are both running for a position. We got to pick it. Someone's got to be picked, right? It's going to be either you or me. We're the two main people running. There are some others running, but we're the two main people running. The only way that I can try to get people to vote for me instead of you, and vice versa, the only way you can get people to vote for you instead of me, is to find those differences and focus almost exclusively on them, and try to then convince people that it's that difference that really matters, more so than the 99.99% that we agree on. What really matters is the 0.001% that we don't agree on. If you vote for Germinal, it is a threat to this party. You need to pick me. And you're saying the same thing on your side. And so people then have to figure out, okay, well, I think I kind of agree with both of them, but okay, I guess I'm going with Germinal. And other people go, okay, I guess I'm going with Spike. And then they look at each other, and now they have to start arguing with each other because they're trying to get people to vote their way instead of your way. And so it sort of encourages, it creates a system whereby we are incentivized and encouraged to first collectivize ourselves, then collectivize everyone else that's not on our side, seek out our differences, and do nothing but fight each other over them. And within not a long period of time, within a matter of a few months or a few years, we're now enemies. We're worse enemies than people out on the street who we don't agree with on maybe 3% of things, right? But we're now we are each other's primary enemy. And the reason for that, and I'm convinced of this now, I mean, I've always known that this is a function of democracy. I think it is the function of democracy. And I think it is the reason that the democratic model is used in the new way that we are oppressed by our status quo government that we have, because it's way easier to impose this on us if we think that we're the participants in it. If we think we're the ones running the show, but in reality, we're just given this spectacle where we can constantly fight each other. It's why we have a duopoly. We have a duopoly in DC for the same reason we had that duopoly at the Hilton Hotel in DC, because democracy creates factionalism. And because of Deverger's law, that means that, we're going to break into two main factions and fight each other on those fault lines that we create. And I am increasingly skeptical that the political process, especially the democratic process, is a useful way to spread liberty, because it encourages us in our mindset and our actions to do the opposite of self-ownership, to do the opposite of individualism, to do the opposite of respecting each other as individual human beings. And it incentivizes and encourages us with the understanding that one of us has to lose. No one actually has to win, but someone has to lose. With that knowledge, it incentivizes us to do everything that we as libertarians hate. It's why, we'll sit here and go, the political process isn't a great way to do things. And we prove it every time we get together, and we laugh about that. But it's true. We literally are ironically proving libertarianism correct by trying to engage in something that we're only trying to do because that's how our political process works. But we show it doesn't work. It doesn't work for us, because we're not trying to divide people. We don't want to, split people into groups and collectivize them to profit off of their suffering and to exploit their hatred of each other and to encourage division. We want to do the opposite. I'm not sure that there is a way to use a political party or the democratic process to spread liberty. And so that's my takeaway. I don't know what the party path is moving forward, and I'm not 100% sure there is one that involves us actually being a effective vehicle for spreading liberty. I'm still holding out hope. I haven't run away yet. I haven't gotten fully blackpilled, but I certainly am a lot more skeptical that there's really any way to use politics to effectively spread liberty.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about the pick. So from what I've seen, Chase Oliver has been the nominee, but it looks like Michael Rectenwald was, I guess, the preferred one.
Yeah.
So what was the exact factor that ended up making Chase Oliver the nominee?
Yeah, so I think that's pretty obvious what happened there. Mike Rectenwald was not only the presumed nominee coming into Saturday before the Trump event, he won the straw poll. So he and Clint Russell won their respective debate straw polls, which is why Clint Russell did his debate with Vivek Ramaswamy, and then why he and Clint did the pre-rebuttal before Trump got up and spoke. I think the main thing that happened, and I think, unfortunately, I think Rec would admit this, and the Mises leadership would admit it as well. I don't know all the details of what exactly happened. I just know that either because he was nervous or because he wasn't aware that he was still going to be speaking or anything like that, he took an edible, and it was noticeable that something happened.
Yeah.
When he got up and gave the pre-rebuttal speech, like, so the way it worked was he spoke, then Clint spoke, then Dave Smith spoke, then Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, spoke, then Trump spoke, and then after that, Rec and Chase Oliver and Mike Termott did a press conference after Trump spoke, because they were the three highest vote getters on the straw poll of who did the best in their presidential debate. When Rec first spoke, he spoke before anyone else, and when he spoke, he seemed, I guess the only way I would put it is off. Like, he seemed like, and I chalked it up at the time. I was like, it almost looked like maybe he was having like a panic attack or something, like, which I understand. I mean, I'm not belittling him for that. This is the biggest moment of your life. You got all these cameras in front of you. You got thousands of people, many of whom are not your supporters. They came to hear Trump. Who are you? And I could see how that would make someone nervous. And I don't know if it was before or after that he took the edible, but whatever it was, he definitely, like, he was off. And then Clint got up, gave a great speech. Dave got up, gave a great speech, but it already seemed off. But then by the time the press conference happened, that was when I know at that point he had definitely taken the edible, and that was when things kind of began to unravel. And it actually reached a point where at one point he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And someone said, then get off the stage. And so we did. He, like, literally got off the stage. And I remember, I mean, I'm sitting there with the delegates, including some of whom were actually on Rec's team. And they were already saying, like, yeah, it's not looking good. And I thought, I don't know. I was actually surprised that he still didn't win, because it's one thing, like, that would affect something like a primary or whatever, but these are delegates who traveled here to vote for their preferred candidate. I still thought that he would come out in the end, but I guess the margin was slim enough that a few of the delegates went home. A few of them decided to vote for Noda and not vote for him. And so he actually, it reached a point where Chase got, I think 49%, and he got 44%, which means the way our system works, it had come down to them. They had already eliminated all the other candidates in the other ballots. Whoever has the lowest vote count is out. And he was the second person. He had the lowest vote count. And so it came down then to Chase Oliver and Noda, and Chase beat Noda by 60%. Then what happened was a bunch of the Mises delegates then went home, because they were like, all right, well, if we don't have Rec, we don't care. And that affected Clint, who, and at that point, it was like, I want to say it was like 1:30 or 2 in the morning. It was so late. People were just, they had been doing this they had literally been doing this for, like, I think 16, 17, 18 hours, something like that. And so people were like, all right, listen, if I'm not getting my candidate, I'm done. And so that allowed that loss of those delegates allowed Clint to lose to Mike Termott. But again, I think whether you like the outcome that Chase won, whether you wish it had been Rec instead of Chase, or whether you wish it had been one of the other candidates. The two things I will tell you is, one, all of the drama and the things that led to the outcome, whether you like it or not, are as a result of we still are in a weaker position no matter who we picked, because we should have picked someone and then put them in front of the other candidates as our nominee and started unifying behind them and let that party serve as a pep rally for our candidate. But unfortunately, we allowed the democratic process to turn us into each other's enemies. And yeah, so I mean, that's ultimately what ended up happening. And so that's where we are right now. Whoever we picked, they were going to be in a weaker position because we spent the prime time of our convention fighting over who was even going to be able to vote as a delegate, and then fighting over who the chair was.
Do you think that Dave Smith will eventually take over the leadership of the party, or even run for president as a libertarian? Because it seems to be like he's the leader of the party at this point, although he doesn't have any official position of power, but he has a lot of influence. So do you think that he will eventually run?
He might run. I don't see him as like becoming the head of the Mises Caucus, or, you know, becoming like the chair of the party. Dave's like me in that way. We're front-facing people. Put us in front of the crowd, put us in front of the debate stage, put us in front of whatever, we'll do that. But if it's coming down to like the back end stuff, you know, we can, you know, give advice and input or whatever, but that's not where we're best suited to put there. So I don't see him becoming like the chair of the party or the head of the Mises Caucus or something like that. Running in the future, very possibly. But I think Dave may have made the calculation that he's already got a bigger platform than he would get running as the nominee. And, you know, he's really good friends with Joe Rogan. He can go on there basically whenever he wants to. He now is developing relationships with Patrick Bet-David and Tucker Carlson. What's he going to get running? He going to get a chance to maybe go on another time? Like, he's already doing all the things that when you say, okay, I would run for president, and then that would it would open up the chance for me to do this. Now he's already doing all that. And by not being the nominee, it allows him to go up there and just tell the truth, just say what's on his mind, and not have it colored by, oh, you're just trying to get my vote, or, oh, you're just trying to get me not to vote for Trump, or trying to get me not to vote for Biden. They can just hear what he has to say. And I can tell you, as someone who has both run for vice president and then been out on the stage, you know, out in the public sphere, not running for anything, your message is far better received overall by the public when you're not running for office, because they don't think you're trying to pull one over on them or get them to vote a certain way or vote for you or to vote against, you know, whoever they think the lesser evil candidate is. They're much more open to going, yeah, you got a point. I mean, I was the guy that would go on Fox regularly and say how you know, Donald Trump was responsible largely for the inflation we were experiencing it. And you'd see these conservatives in the panel, and they'd be like, oh, yeah, you know, he did. We really didn't like that. CARES Act really was a mess. But if I had been running for something and saying that, their guard's going to be up. They're going to go, yeah, but how do we know? You know, they'd say, well, you know, it's not like you're going to win, and, you know, we got to stop by. They couldn't do that to me if I'm not running. I'm just telling you the guy voted for, or he signed the CARES Act and he pressured Republicans to vote for it. You know, I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm just telling you that he run up $7 trillion in debt, and the Federal Reserve had to cover it. And that's why, you know, what was it? 40% of every dollar ever in the circulation was created inside of a 1-year period. Now suddenly the price of everything's high. That's why. I'm not telling you who to vote for. So it's far better received that way. So I think Dave may had made that calculation, but I don't want to speak for Dave. I mean, Dave may run in 28 or 32 or whatever. Dave's around my age. So, I mean, it's, you know, we're both in the political world. We're young, which means we are old, but we're not old. We're in our, I think he's 40 and I'm 42 or something like that. And he, I think he's about 40. So, I mean, you know, he might run in the future, but I think he may have made a calculation that he really doesn't need to, and there's not really any good reason for him to.
Yeah, he has definitely more influence at this point than putting himself in the political class, and it's going to be under scrutiny, and and that could
And that's
actually
the other
hurt.
thing. He's going to now, like, every off-color joke he's ever told, they're going to be putting under the ringer and,
Oh yeah.
Looking into his family and stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that. There's no, like, why do that to yourself if you don't have to?
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's not going to do it. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if he never does it, it would not surprise me that he's just like, why do I have to do any of that? I'm an entertainer who gets to tell the truth and say the facts without having to do all that. Why would I bother doing that?
Absolutely. Well, Spike, before we go, I have one last question for you. So, what advice would you give to a teenager or like a young adult who is probably starting college that is
Yeah.
interested in getting into the liberty movement? Not necessarily the Libertarian Party, but
Yeah.
someone that wants to make an impact in the liberty movement.
Well, I would encourage them to look into what I'm doing at You Are the Power. So I'm going to do a bit of a shameless plug, but I'm going to tell you why I'm saying that. For a very long time, I spent time arguing with people about stuff, and not necessarily like getting in debates and fights online, although I did some of that too, but like making arguments. So I would say, this is what I think about this. And then if someone said something in disagreement with that, then I would, explain to them the point I was making and why they were wrong and whatever. And I'll still do some of that. It's more of a hobby than anything now, but it's also a way to signal to other people who agree with me that, like, yeah, we're on the same page here. But I realize it's not an incredibly useful way of bringing people over to you. An incredibly useful way is to do the stuff that I learned back when I was running small businesses and when I was, providing services to people, is that instead I wouldn't show up to someone and go, you need a website. And if you don't think you need a website, then you really need to think about your business model. I would go to them and hear what they needed, which was more business and more money. And then I'd explain to them how I could provide that to them. And I wasn't arguing with them. And if they said no thanks, I go, okay, great. And I go to someone else. And so what I've started doing, applying that to the how to spread liberty, I realized that libertarianism basically distills down to one word: respect, and meaning respecting that one another are individual human beings. It's an intrinsic thing that almost all of us do. And the ones among us who don't do it are the sociopaths and the psychopaths and the criminals and the politicians. So we know that the people who don't intrinsically respect one another as individual human beings are the bad people by and large. And yet we set that expectation of human respect aside when it comes to the government, because we've been conditioned to be told that they have this special pass not to respect us as human beings. But the point of all that is everyone intrinsically understands this, which is why if I tell a story about parents who took their child to a hospital because she was, had some swelling and bruising, and the hospital finds out that the child has some kind of chronic health disorder that's causing the bruising, and then they call it abuse and intentionally lie and intentionally take the child from the parents and traffic the child through the foster care system because the federal government pays them to call everything abuse, even if it isn't abuse. Very few people are going to go, oh, I understand. Yeah, that's okay. Just about everyone is going to say, that's terrible. This is horrible. We shouldn't allow that. And so we find cases like this at You Are the Power: child protective service abuse, eminent domain abuse, zoning abuse, cases where innocent, perfectly peaceful people who are minding their own business and living their lives, not harming anyone, are basically abused by government because government's not treating them like individual human beings. They're treating them like a funding opportunity, and all they have to do is ruin their lives in the process. And we find these cases, and instead of using them to make a political argument or even an economic argument for that matter, we just present the story. And we say, we think this is wrong. And if you want to join us, we're going to help stop this. We're going to put an end to this. Here's the page you can go to and the officials you can contact. Here's the wording you can use when you email them or when you call them to tell them what you think about it. And if you join us at You Are the Power, we'll bring you causes like this all the time. And for a few minutes every few days, you can help us reunite families and stop, the stealing of homes and businesses. And so what we're doing is we're getting people to understand that this bad thing is happening. We couch in it, talk about, we never get into things like non-aggression or anything like that, but we'll say things like, this would have never happened if these government officials had treated them like human beings instead of an obstacle or an opportunity. If they hadn't collectivized them, this wouldn't have happened. And then we put that same thing in the wording that we give them to tell the politicians when they tell them to back off. So not only are we getting them to agree with it, because we're already talking with them about something they agree with us on. We're not trying to get them like, hey, have you ever considered this? We're telling them a thing they already agree with us on, and we're just explaining why it happened. Then we give them an opportunity to demonstrate that they're endorsing it and telling other people it by literally giving them the wording they can use to now in their own words, or even just by copy pasting that as themselves. And now they're assigning their self-value to this newfound concept that they now immediately agree with, which is basically libertarianism. And then we give them an opportunity to do it over and over and over again. So not only are we helping people now, not only are we bringing people back into the liberty movement who had become so jaded and so sick of just spending all their time on these useless efforts that never go anywhere, we're now giving them something that actually gives them small incremental wins along the way and makes them feel like they're actually doing something useful. But we're actually going out into the general public, the normies, and we're presenting them with things they already agree with us on and giving them an opportunity to signal to everyone else, those public officials, their loved ones, the rest of the public at large, that they agree with us on our terms. We are creating a movement by, instead of arguing with people or looking for the most perfect logical argument, we're instead starting with people first and their stories first, and then giving them a game plan to actually do something about it. And then again, learning from How to Win Friends and Influence People, give them the opportunity to join us on the thing we're doing. And that's what we're doing with You Are the Power. If you want to go and join us, you can go to youarethepower.net, become a part of it. We'd love to have you as a part of it. But whatever you do, whether it is with You Are the Power, whether it is with running for office, whether it's with starting your own organization that does that, whatever you do, if you just decide you want to be one of these libertarians who uses your innovations in the market to spread technological alternatives to the government that allows people to be able to kind of in almost like an agorist model to have alternatives to government and to opt out from government as much as possible. Whatever you're doing, make sure that you're leading with people first and their needs first, and then presenting a solution or a better alternative or an action, a call to action to move forward and to make things better, and then stay consistent with that. It's always about, take a step back. Why are we doing this? Because we want to live better lives. We want other people to live better lives. We want everyone to be able to make choices for themselves so that they can be more harmonious, more prosperous, and happier. And so if we lead with that, if we don't lose the forest for the trees and get caught up in our policy arguments with strangers on the internet, as fun as that can be, if instead we lead, this is about people. Here are the people we are helping. Here are the people that are being harmed. Here is our alternative or our solution or our thing that will help with that. And here is how everyone can join me in this thing. You're not only keeping yourself in a positive mindset and actually creating change, but you're encouraging others to join you. You are now a leader in a movement that you have created.
This is awesome. I will definitely add the website, the link of the website in the description of this episode. Spike, thank you so much for coming to the GGV Publishing Podcast. It's a true honor to have you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Germinal. It's always good to talk with you, man.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it was the legend himself on the podcast, Spike Cohen. Thank you.